The observation deck of the Xel'nari research vessel hummed with its usual ambient frequency as Commander Vel'thar reviewed the planetary scan data. Earth, designation 7, Alpha 3, had been under passive surveillance for approximately 2,000 rotations of their central star. Commander, we're detecting unusual thermal signatures in the western continent region, reported Science Officer Kira, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with concern. Vel'thar moved to the holographic display, his 6 sensory appendages processing multiple data streams simultaneously. The Xel'nari had observed countless civilizations across 17 galaxies, but something about these humans perpetually unsettled him. Focus the collectors. Let's see what they're doing now. The image materialized, crystal clear despite the atmospheric distortion. A massive stone structure, terraced and imposing, dominated the settlement below. Thousands of humans had gathered, their primitive textiles decorated with vibrant patterns that seemed almost celebratory. It appears to be some form of ceremonial gathering, Kira observed, adjusting the frequency filters. Based on our linguistic analysis, this civilization calls themselves the Aztec. They've developed sophisticated agricultural systems, complex mathematics, and astronomical observations that rival some level 2 civilizations. Vel'thar felt a familiar weight in his thoracic cavity, what humans might call dread. The Xel'nari had hoped this species would be different. Their capacity for love, for art, for sacrifice on behalf of others had initially filled the research team with optimism. Maintain observation. Record everything. On the screen, a procession began. Warriors in elaborate feathered regalia escorted a young human male up the pyramid steps. The man walked with dignity, his head held high. He had been prepared for this moment, had perhaps even volunteered. The crowd below chanted in rhythmic unison, a sound that resonated through the ship's audio processors. Junior observer Thane, who had only recently joined the Earth Research Division, moved closer to the display. What are they doing? Is this a coronation ceremony? No one answered. The senior officers had seen this pattern before, in different forms, across different human cultures. The Phoenicians and their children. The Druids and their wicker constructs. The countless variations of the same horrifying theme. At the pyramid summit, priests in ornate masks awaited. Their obsidian blade caught the sunlight, a dark mirror reflecting the sky. Commander, should we intervene? Thane's neural patterns flashed urgent yellow. The prime directive allows for. We do not interfere, Vel'thar said quietly, though every fiber of his being screamed otherwise. We observe. We document. We understand. But that human is about to be. The blade fell. Thane's bioluminescence went completely dark, a physiological response to extreme psychological trauma. Across the observation deck, similar reactions rippled through the crew. The Xel'nari possessed a heightened empathic resonance, an evolutionary trait that had driven them to abandon all forms of violence 3 million years ago. Kira's voice trembled through the translation matrix. They believe it sustains their sun god. They think without this, their world will end. Vel'thar watched as the priests held aloft the still beating heart. The crowd below erupted in what their analysis subroutines labeled as joy, relief, gratitude. A young human female in the front row wept, but whether from sorrow or religious ecstasy, the sensors couldn't determine. I don't understand, Thane whispered, his adolescent mind struggling with the contradiction. We've watched them for years. They create beauty. They compose music that resonates across harmonic dimensions we can barely perceive. They sacrifice their own comfort to protect their young, their elderly, their weak. A human mother will throw herself into fire to save her child. A human father will starve himself to feed his family. They have this enormous capacity for selflessness and love. And yet they do this, Kira finished, her own luminescence dimmed to a barely perceptible glow. Vel'thar pulled up historical files, images cascading across multiple screens. Romans feeding humans to beasts for entertainment. Inquisitors burning people alive for thought crimes. Mass exterminations based on arbitrary physical characteristics or belief systems. Warfare that consumed millions. Every civilization we've studied goes through stages, he explained, though the explanation felt hollow even to him. Most abandon such practices as they develop scientific reasoning, as they understand causation, as they recognize the fundamental unity of their species. Most, Thane repeated. But not all. The commander didn't answer. Instead, he fast-forwarded through the databanks, showing the progression, or lack thereof. Century after century of human history painted in blood. They're trapped, Kira said suddenly, a note of comprehension breaking through her horror. Their cognitive development outpaced their moral evolution. They're intelligent enough to create complex societies, elaborate theologies, justifications for anything, but not yet wise enough to see through those justifications. On screen, the ceremony continued. More victims, more offerings to gods that existed only in the collective imagination of the terrified and hopeful. Each death was accompanied by prayer, by sacred ritual, by the absolute conviction that this was necessary, right, even holy. Thane watched a young child being prepared for sacrifice, decorated with flowers and precious stones. The child was crying. Can they not hear that? Can they not see that this being doesn't want to die? They hear their theology louder than they hear the cries, Vel'thar said. They see their cosmic narrative more clearly than they see the individual before them. This is the danger of abstract thinking without sufficient compassion. They can convince themselves that the idea is more important than the life. The observation continued in silence broken only by the ship's systems. When the ceremony finally concluded, several crew members had to leave the deck entirely, their empathic systems overwhelmed. Vel'thar ordered the recordings archived and encrypted. The Galactic Council would see these files. They would debate, as they always did, whether a species capable of such acts should be contacted, should be guided, or should be left to either evolve beyond their violence or destroy themselves in it. Commander, Kira approached him as the display darkened. In your 300 years of observation duty, across 47 different species, have you ever seen a civilization overcome this? One that practiced such systematic violence against its own kind and yet managed to develop into something worthy of the galactic community? Vel'thar was quiet for a long moment. Twice, he finally said. The Korathi had a similar phase. They sacrificed thousands to their storm deities. Today, they're among our finest philosophers and healers. The transformation took time, catastrophic failure of their old systems, and a fundamental reimagining of their relationship to existence. And they stopped. Yes. When they finally understood that their gods were reflections of themselves, that the storms cared nothing for blood, that the universe responded to understanding rather than appeasement. When they developed the courage to face an indifferent cosmos without the crutch of magical thinking. Thane returned to the deck, his coloration still muted. Will the humans make it? Will they stop? Vel'thar pulled up the probability matrices, vast calculations based on countless variables. The models suggest they have a 43% chance of reaching level 1 civilization status within the next 1,000 years. If they do, these practices will end. They'll look back at this era with the same horror we feel watching it. They'll weep for the victims and wonder how their ancestors could have been so blind. And if they don't make it, then they'll find new and more efficient ways to sacrifice each other to their various gods, ideologies, and fears. They'll scale up their capacity for violence along with their technology until they either destroy themselves or become something we cannot allow to spread beyond their solar system. Kira pulled up another data stream. Look at this though. Same time period, different region. A human teacher named Gautama telling his followers to practice compassion for all sentient beings. Another named Jesus saying to love your enemies. Philosophers arguing for the inherent dignity of all people. Even in the midst of this darkness, there are lights. There are always lights, Vel'thar agreed. The question is whether those lights can grow bright enough, fast enough, to illuminate the darkness before it consumes everything. They watched in silence as the sun set over the pyramid, casting long shadows across the stones still stained with the day's offerings. Below, families returned to their homes, farmers to their fields, children to their play. Life continued, as it always did, the extraordinary horror of the sacrifice already fading into the ordinary rhythm of existence. The worst part, Thane said quietly, is that they think they're being good. That young man who died today probably went willingly, believing he was saving his people. The priests believe they're serving a sacred duty. The crowd believes they're participating in cosmic necessity. They've wrapped this horror in so many layers of meaning and purpose that they can't see the simple truth anymore. What truth? Kira asked. That they're killing someone who wanted to live. Everything else is decoration, justification, a story they tell themselves to make the unbearable bearable. Vel'thar placed a gentle appendage on Thane's shoulder, a gesture of comfort. You're right. And recognizing that truth is often the first step toward change. Some of those humans down there know it too. They feel the wrongness even if they can't articulate it, even if they're too afraid to speak against it. Those are the seeds of transformation. Should we hope for them? Thane asked. Is that logical? Logic has little to do with it, Vel'thar admitted. Hope is a choice, not a calculation. Despite everything we've seen, I choose to hope that humans will eventually realize what they're capable of becoming, not just what they're capable of destroying. That one day, they'll create ceremonies celebrating life instead of rituals demanding death. The observation deck gradually emptied as crew members returned to their duties, each carrying the weight of what they had witnessed. Such was the burden of the watchers, the observers, those who bore witness to the universe's most difficult truths. Before leaving, Vel'thar programmed a memorial into the ship's eternal archive. The names of the victims, what little their sensors could discern. The Xel'nari believed that to be observed was to matter, that to be remembered was to never truly die. May you find peace in whatever comes after, he whispered, an old Xel'nari blessing for the departed. And may your species one day understand what you truly lost today. In the vastness of space, the research vessel resumed its orbit, silent and invisible, watching and waiting to see which future humanity would choose.